Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. Hare Krishna. It's September 28th, 2024. We're continuing our reading from the introduction of Bhagavad Gita as it is in this pre-1978 edition. We're on page 20, and it's the paragraph that begins, "Yet Bhagavad Gita does not advise us to go to any of the planets in this material world." So that's where we're starting. That's where we're starting. No, okay. I'm going to correct myself. We're actually on page 18. Page 18 at the top. The paragraph that begins, "Factually, we are related to the Supreme Lord in service. The Supreme Lord is the supreme enjoyer, and we living entities are his servitors." So yesterday in morning program, we read the pages before that. So this is page 18 in this edition of the introduction to Bhagavad Gita. So Srila Prabhupada writes, "Factually, we are related to the Supreme Lord in service. The Supreme Lord is the supreme enjoyer, and we living entities are his servitors. We are created for his enjoyment, and if we participate in that eternal enjoyment with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we become happy. We cannot become happy otherwise. It is not possible to be happy independently, just as no one part of the body can be happy without cooperating with the stomach. It is not possible for the living entity to be happy without rendering transcendental loving service unto the Supreme Lord." So Srila Prabhupada's giving the happiness formula here. And right, so like Hare Krishna Ladini Shakti, and we're reading from Bhagavad Gita, Haribo. We're reading from Bhagavad Gita Introduction.
Thank you.
I'm on page 18 of the English edition of the pre-78 version. We just read the paragraph starting, "Factually, we are related to the Supreme Lord in service." And so Prabhupada says, we are created for his enjoyment. And if we participate in that eternal enjoyment with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we become happy. We cannot become happy otherwise. Just thinking like anyone who's selling anything or anyone who's looking for our votes to be elected or any system of personal growth or coaching, or the idea is you'll be happy. So it's not that those other things won't necessarily make us happy, but they only will contribute to our happiness if they're, to whatever extent they're aligned with truly supporting and energizing us in service to the core of all existence, the very foundation of all existence, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we're going to serve, just like fire is going to be hot, water is going to be wet, sugar is going to be sweet, and we're going to serve. And our choice is where to direct our unavoidable propensity for service, and to whatever extent we direct it in towards tamas, rajas, even material sattva, to whatever extent we direct our propensity for service in that most natural way. Jivara Srupoi Krishnera Nichidas Krishnera Tatasta Shakti Beta Prakash. Then we'll be happy. That's the natural happiness of the soul. And to whatever extent we're misidentifying the self with the body, and our propensity for service is somewhere that's not pleasing to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, we will be in anxiety, we'll be depressed, we'll be jealous, we'll be envious, etc., etc. So very, very simple right there. So much nuance and subtlety and complexity, right? This Krishna consciousness practice and philosophy in one sense, it's so subtle and complex that the greatest intelligent, high IQ philosopher just can't get it. And simultaneously, it's so simple that a little child can easily grasp it, can easily grasp it. Both are true simultaneously. And it's a function of the heart. It's a function of the purity, the innocence or lack of it of our heart and consciousness. So I'll continue reading from Introduction to Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita, worship of different demigods or rendering service to them is not approved. It is stated in the 7th chapter, 20th verse, Kamestesteri tagena prapajante devata tom tom niyamam astaya prakricha niyata asvaya. Quote, those whose minds are distorted by material desires surrender unto demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures. That's Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, text 20. Here it is plainly said that those who are directed by lust worship the demigods and not the Supreme Lord Krishna. When we mention the name Krishna, we do not refer to any sectarian name. Krishna means the highest pleasure, and it is confirmed that the Supreme Lord is the reservoir or storehouse of all pleasure. We are all hankering after pleasure. Nandamayo Vyasa, that's from Vedanta Sutra 1.1.12. The living entities, like the Lord, are full of consciousness and they are after happiness. The Lord is perpetually happy, and if the living entities associate with the Lord, cooperate with him, and take part in his association, then they also become happy. Again, very simply, in a childlike way, Prabhupada's emphasizing happy, happy, be happy. Here's how to be happy. No personal agenda there. Straightforward and simple. The Lord descends to this mortal world to show his pastimes in Vrindavan, which are full of happiness. When Lord Sri Krishna was in Vrindavan, his activities with his cowherd boyfriends, with his damsel friends, with the inhabitants of Vrindavan, and with the cows were all full of happiness. The total population of Vrindavan knew nothing but Krishna. But Lord Krishna even discouraged his father Nanda Maharaj from worshipping the demigod Indra, because he wanted to establish the fact that people need not worship any demigod. They need only worship the Supreme Lord, because their ultimate goal is to return to his abode. That's a major theme of all these transcendental literatures. Bhagavad Gita, Krishna clarifies Ahamadir hi Devanam Maharshinam Jasarvashai says, I'm not a demigod or a sage. I'm the source of all demigods and sages. We see in Krishna book great demigods they're also great devotees. Vaishnavanam Yadha Sambhu. Lord Shiva is the greatest Vaishnava. He's the head of a sampradaya, just like Lord Brahma is. Still, there are pastimes where Shiva tries to defeat Krishna, and Krishna shows his supremacy. Lord Brahma tries to outsmart, trick Krishna with his cleverness, and it boomerangs on him. And he realizes, oh, this isn't some ordinary cowherd boy. This is my Lord and Master, Govinda Madi Pusham Tamaham Bhajami. Indra tries to murder all the residents of Vrindavan. It's heavy. It's heavy. So Krishna didn't have to try hard. With the pinky of his left hand, he defeats Indra like that. Srila Prabhupada continues. The abode of Lord Sri Krishna is described in the Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter, 6th verse. Na tad pasayate suryo na shasanko na pavaka yad gatva na nivartante tadama paramam mama. That's Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, text 6. That abode of mine is not illumined by the sun or moon or by electricity, and anyone who reaches it never comes back to this material world. So, I just say that verse from Bhagavad Gita. chapter 15, that's the chapter that starts with Krishna's banyan tree analogy, which is a form of like a modern day virtual reality game analogy. So interesting that Prabhupada, he in the translation, he includes not illumined by sun or moon, nor by electricity. So Prabhupada is like, he's really making it current for us, currently. No light bulbs or fluorescent or nothing needed. Everything's Chintamani. Yeah. Krishna and Balaram, they would go into a dark storage room and their ornaments lit up the whole darkness, but actually it was the effulgence of their body, the whole Brahma Gyoti. The sun, the sun is really reflected light of the Brahma Gyoti, and Brahmano hi pratishtaham, and the whole Brahma Gyoti, the glaring white light. It's simply reflection. It's simply an emanation from the body of Krishna. So Prabhupada says no electricity, making it very current for us. Okay, because even back 200 years ago, there wasn't what we in modern times call electricity. The Vedas personified, they're like the speakers of the Sri Upanishad. And they say, Hiranmayena Patrena. Hiranya is like the golden effulgence. Hiranmayena Patrena. Hiranmayena Patrena. The Dharma Satyaya Drishtaye. They say they're praying to Krishna, they're asking Krishna that please remove your glaring effulgence so we can see your smiling face. So much of the Upanishads emphasize the impersonal aspect of the absolute truth, which is a real aspect of the absolute truth. But Prabhupada particularly gave us the Sri Ishopanishad because it really opens the door to personalism. So the Vedas personified. They're actually frustrated, even though they're enjoying the bliss of the oneness of the Brahma Gyoti and freedom from material desires. But they're saying, but please remove this so we can see your smiling face, indicating that the personal aspect, Bhagavan Sri Krishna, the personal aspect of the absolute is the most complete aspect of the absolute. Satyasya pitamukam tattvam pushana pavinu satya dharmaya drishtaye. Yes. So they want to have darshan, diksha of Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so Prabhupada gave us the Sri Ishopanishad. Srila Prabhupada continues, commenting on the Tad Basayate verse. This verse gives a description of that eternal sky. Of course, we have a material conception of the sky, and we think of it in relationship to the sun, moon, stars, and so on. But in this verse, the Lord states that in the eternal sky, there is no need for the sun, nor for the moon, nor fire of any kind, because the spiritual sky is already illuminated by the Brahma Gyoti, the rays emanating from the Supreme Lord. We are trying with difficulty to reach other planets, but it is not difficult to understand the abode of the Supreme Lord. This abode is referred to as Goloka. In the Brahma Samhita, it is beautifully described. Goloka eva nivasatya kilatma bhutta. The Lord resides eternally in his abode, Goloka, yet he can be approached from this world, and to this end the Lord comes to manifest his real form, such Chidananda Vigraha. When he manifests this form, there is no need for our imagining what he looks like. To discourage such imaginative speculation, he descends and exhibits himself as he is, as Shyamasundar. Unfortunately, the less intelligent deride him because he comes as one of us and plays with us as a human being. But because of this, we should not consider that the Lord is one of us. It is by his potency that he presents himself in his real form before us and displays his pastimes, which are prototypes of those pastimes found in his abode. Prabhupada using the term prototypes. Sometimes he uses the term facsimile. So when Prabhupada in the 60s, early 70s, there was nothing called fax machines in those days. But Prabhupada uses the words that basically the Gokula pastimes of Krishna, they're a fax. They're a fax from Goloka Vrindavan. They're a facsimile. In the effulgent rays of the spiritual sky, there are innumerable planets floating. The Brahmagyoti emanates from the supreme abode, Krishna Loka, and the Anandamaya Chinmaya planets, which are not material, float in those rays. The Lord says, Natad Basaya Te Soyo Na Shashenko Na Pavaka Yad Gatva Na Divartente Tatama Paramam Mama. Prabhupada quotes that verse twice in this section of the introduction. One who can approach that spiritual sky is not required to descend again to the material sky. In the material sky, even if we approach the highest planet, Brahmaloka, what to speak of the moon, we will find the same conditions of life, namely birth, death, disease, and old age. No planet in the material universe is free from these four principles of material existence. Therefore, the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, Aprama Purnaloka Punarvartina Arjuna, the living entities are traveling from one planet to another, not by mechanical arrangement, but by a spiritual process. This is also mentioned, Yanti Deva Vrata Devan Pritrinyanti Pitri Vrata. No mechanical arrangement is necessary if we want interplanetary travel. The Gita instructs Yanti Deva Vrata Devan. The moon, the sun, and higher planets are called Svargaloka. There are three different statuses of planets, higher, middle, and lower planetary systems. The Earth belongs to the middle planetary system. Bhagavad Gita informs us how to travel to the higher planetary systems, Devaloka, with a very simple formula, Yanti Deva Vrata Devan. One need only worship the particular demigod of that particular planet, and in that way go to the moon, the sun, or any of the higher planetary systems. Just noticing some language Srila Prabhupada uses in that paragraph. He says, one who can approach the spiritual sky is not required to descend again to the material sky. Okay, right, so there's so much discussion often about the fall of the jiva. So Prabhupada, he's saying that we enter the spiritual sky, the planets of Krishna, Goloka Vrindavan, Vaikuntha planet. Then one is not required to descend again to the material sky. So not required means we're not forced because we have these desires. We're not forced. But not required is not the same as can. It's not the same as can't return. Okay, but not required. I'm seeing something there. Prabhupada's very, I think, subtle and refined with his use of language. Because Prabhupada so much emphasizes that at every stage of existence and all spheres and corners of creation, the jiva has free will. It's not then when we achieve Shuddha Sattva, pure bhakti, then we become robots and our free will goes away. Then we become like completely in ignorance with no, then our free will is fully manifest. And of course, in such a state of consciousness, we have such a taste of serving Krishna with love and devotion that even the finest, most wonderful material pleasures are not attractive. We wouldn't choose them. Example we sometimes give is like, Srila Prabhupada gives it like any one of us can go right now and turn on the fire on the stove and put our hand on the fire, but we wouldn't do that. Not that we can. So even the greatest pleasures that we go for in our material life, we can imagine the greatest pleasures, subtle or gross. So like for even the demigods were to speak of the residents of Goloka Vrindavan, that would be like putting our hand on the hot stove, or a similar analogy. So like same idea. So let's say the pig is just eating stool and it's very happy. So like we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't do that, right? Because we have our form of eating pleasure and pleasures. So we wouldn't do that. So then but what we consider, real pleasure and enjoyment. So the pure devotees, they're seeing it's just like, you're so attracted to eating stool. So they wouldn't do that. But Prabhupada, again, he uses the term, is not required to descend again to the material sky. Doesn't mean like their free will is gone and they have no independence and they can't. Just making that linguistic distinction, which for me stands out. Yet, Bhagavad Gita does not advise us to go to any of the planets in this material world, because even if we go to Brahmaloka, the highest planet, through some sort of mechanical contrivance by maybe traveling for 40,000 years, and who would live that long, we will still find the material inconveniences of birth, death, disease, and old age. But one who wants to approach the supreme planet, Krishna Loka, or any of the other planets within the spiritual sky, will not meet with these material inconveniences. Amongst all of the planets in the spiritual sky, there is one supreme planet called Goloka Vrindavan, which is the original planet in the abode of the original personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. All of this information is given in Bhagavad Gita, and we are given, through its instruction, information how to leave the material world and begin a truly blissful life in the spiritual sky. I know in the purport to that verse, Prabhupada's giving a purport to that verse here, 15:6. And in the purport to that verse, in chapter 15, Prabhupada writes, one should be captivated by this information, like out of compassion. He's imploring us, like Krishna's giving information about the spiritual realm. And of course, that's expanded in practically infinitely so in Srimad Bhagavatam and Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, and nectar of instruction and nectar of devotion. So Prabhupada uses that term, when one should be captivated by that, by this information, like a travel brochure, right? Oh, here, come to Paris, visit Tokyo. Oh, here, the Redwood Mountains in Northern California, travel brochures. Okay, so Krishna's giving us like a travel brochure, and Prabhupada, he really wants us to like pay attention, be attracted here. I'm moving now to that purport, chapter 15, text 6, and the third paragraph of the purport begins. One should be captivated by this information. He should desire to transfer himself to that eternal world and extricate himself from this false reflection of reality. For one who is too much attached to this material world, it is very difficult to cut that attachment. But if he takes to Krishna consciousness, there is a chance of gradually becoming detached. One has to associate himself with devotees, those who are in Krishna consciousness. One should search out a society dedicated to Krishna consciousness and learn how to discharge devotional service. In this way, he can cut off his attachment to the material world. One cannot become detached from the attraction of the material world simply by dressing himself in saffron cloth. He must become attached to the devotional service of the Lord. Therefore, one should take it very seriously that devotional service, as described in the 12th chapter, is the only way to get out of this false representation of the real tree. In chapter 14, the contamination of all kinds of processes by material nature is described. Only devotional service is described as purely transcendental. Returning to the introduction. In the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the real picture of the material world is given. It is said there, Urdhva Mulam Adashakham Ashvatam Prahur Avyayam Chandam Shi Yasya Parnani Yastam Veda Savedavit. Quote, the Supreme Lord said, there is a banyan tree which has its roots upward and its branches down, and the Vedic hymns are its leaves. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. That's the first verse of the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Here, the material world is described as a tree whose roots are upwards and branches are below. We have experience of a tree whose roots are upward. If one stands on the bank of a river or any reservoir of water, he can see that the trees reflected in the water are upside down. The branches go downward and the roots upward. Similarly, this material world is a reflection of the spiritual world. The material world is but a shadow of reality. In the shadow, there is no reality or substantiality. But from the shadow, we can understand that there is substance and reality. In the desert, there is no water, but the mirage suggests that there is such a thing as water. In the material world, there is no water. There is no happiness. But the real water of actual happiness is there in the spiritual world. The Greek philosopher Plato uses a similar analogy, the cave and shadows in a cave. So it's quite brilliant, as we might expect it would be. It's coming from Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the all-attractive personality filled with all wisdom and strength and like that. But just like it's the shadow. And, it's the shadow. So it's like from a shadow of a tree, or a shadow of a human being standing somewhere. From the shadow, we don't get a clue of what the real thing is like. The texture, the fragrance, the form. We don't get a clue of what the taste. We don't get a clue of what the real thing is like. At the same time, so the shadow is useless, but that's not true, because from the shadow we can very clearly understand. There must be the substantial entity. It's the shadow of a building. It's a shadow. So there must be a real building. The shadow. There must be a real person with substance. The shadow of a tree. It must be a real tree, right? Yeah. So in a sense, the shadow gives us no clue of the real thing, but it gives us clear information that the real thing exists. And this whole the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna starts. Okay, there's the reflection, and in that purport to the first verse of the 15th chapter, Srila Prabhupada gives an explanation using geometry. That so the reflected tree in the water, just illusion. And he said, yeah, the Maya bodies, the impersonalists, the Brahma body, they get that. It's true. It's just you're not going to get a real mango just by going in the reflected tree. It's futile. It's empty. So the whole material life is illusion and futile, just a shadow. True. And Prabhupada emphasizes, and that's only 180 degrees. A circle has 360 degrees. So the other 360 degrees, that's the real tree with the real trunk and real fruits and real leaves and real branches. And to get to and so there are so many processes that can bring us, even like, as many mundane poets, they have realization of the illusory nature of material life. We can find it in modern music lyrics, and that's good, like that. But to get an experience and knowledge of what's the real tree like, only the process of bhakti will take us there. Only the process of bhakti, because then we have the Supreme Personality of Godhead revealing the nature of his dham and his form and his flute, etc., to the childlike, sincere, pure devotees. In the material world, there's no water, there's no happiness, but the real water of actual happiness is there in the spiritual world. The Lord suggests that we attain the spiritual world in the following manner. Nirmana moha jita sangha dosha adyatma nitya vinivritta kama dvanver vimukta sukha dukkha samgya gacchantya mudha param avyayam tat. that Padam Avyayam, or eternal kingdom, can be reached by one who is Nirmana Moha. What does this mean? We are after designations. Someone wants to become a son, someone wants to become Lord, someone wants to become the president or a rich man or a king or something else. As long as we are attached to these designations, we are attached to the body because designations belong to the body. But we are not these bodies, and realizing this is the first stage in spiritual realization. We are associated with the three modes of material nature, but we must become detached through devotional service to the Lord. If we are not attached to devotional service to the Lord, then we cannot become detached from the modes of material nature. I'll read that one again. If we are not attached to the devotional service to the Lord, then we cannot become detached from the modes of material nature. We talk a lot about don't be detached, don't be dependent. And in so many circles, you hear that a lot. However, and again, this is distinctively bhakti, siddhanta, bhakti realization. The nature of the self is to be attached. Oh, that's in the conditioned state. No, in the fully liberated, enlightened state, our nature is to be attached. Our choice is whether to be attached to spirit or matter. And to the extent that we've not attached ourselves to spirit, meaning that which matter and material time can never interfere with, to the extent that we're attached to bhakti service, because we're going to serve, is service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. To the extent that we're attached there, then Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Bahuji Tajana Yat Yashubhayagam Gyanam Chadahitukam. Then naturally we're detached from matter. We get the knowledge. I'm not this body. I'm spirit, soul, and we're detached from matter. And to the extent that we're not attached to devotional service and the form, spiritual form, Krishna's form, the form of Krishna's pure devotee, the instruction of Krishna's pure devotee, and the forms and the pastimes and the qualities and the names of spiritual personalities, then we will be attached to material forms, names, pastimes, associates, things like that. There's no void. There's no void. Right? We're going to be attached and dependent somewhere, and to the extent that we're dependent and attached on spiritual form, names, service, then that's freedom. Then we're free from the push and pull of the modes of material nature. And those modes they're reciprocating with our lower self, the lower self, that part of us attracted to rajas and tamas, and that those ropes are vicious taskmasters. So Srila Prabhupada writes, yeah, if we are not attached to devotional service to the Lord, then we cannot become detached from the modes of material nature. Designations and attachments are due to our lust and desire, or wanting to lord it over the material nature. As long as we do not give up this propensity of lording it over material nature, there is no possibility of returning to the kingdom of the Supreme, the Sanatana Dham. That eternal kingdom, which is never destroyed, can be approached by one who is not bewildered by the attractions of false material enjoyments, who is situated in the service of the Supreme Lord. One so situated can easily approach that supreme abode. Elsewhere in the Gita it is stated, Avyaktoksara ityuktas tamahu paramam gatim yam propyana nivartante tatama paramam mama. Avyakta means unmanifested. Not even all of the material world is manifested before us. Our senses are so imperfect that we cannot even see all of the stars within this material universe. In Vedic literature, we can receive much information about all the planets, and we can believe it or not believe it. All of the important planets are described in Vedic literatures, especially Srimad Bhagavatam and the spiritual world, which is beyond this material sky, is described as avyakta, unmanifested. One should desire and hanker after that spiritual kingdom, for when one attains that kingdom, he does not have to return to this material world. Again, Prabhupada's language. He does not have to return to this material world. He's not saying he can't return. Okay, choices there. And interesting phraseology from Srila Prabhupada. In Vedic literature, we can receive much information about all the planets, and we can believe it or not believe it. So there's no force, and this relates to epistemology. Sometimes people say, I only believe what I can see. I'm a person of reason and science and etc. So, so of course that's nonsense, not true. If we ask anyone, do you believe in electrons and protons? Well, of course. Oh, you've seen electrons and protons? Well, no. But you said you only believe in what you can see. Well, so actually, you read a book, you heard from a scientist or your high school science teacher like that, and you trust them. I'm not saying you shouldn't trust them, but you heard. So practically all of our knowledge comes from hearing rather than seeing. Do you believe that a place called Tibet exists? For most everyone, of course. Have you seen Tibet? No, but you said you. Well, I saw a documentary on PBS, and I trust them. I trust those television personalities. I have friends who went to Tibet, and I trust my friends. Okay, so we hear from sources we trust. We hear from sources we trust. Okay, and even if someone were to say, well, if someone, well, the atomic physicists, they have these machines and they can see the atoms. Well, that's questionable, but even so, it's the same thing. Because, okay, so actually you're saying there's a process, and that's what we're saying, to see spirit and to realize Goloka Vrindavan. There's a process called bhakti, and anyone can practice this. So similarly, there's quite an arduous process. Like okay, if you want access to those Van der Graaf generators or whatever it is, those machines where supposedly you could see the atoms, subatomic particles. Yeah, so you need to go to school for 8 years and do an internship and a fellowship, and you need to then get a position at a research university. I mean, it's an intense process requiring so much investment of resources and time. So similarly, bhakti, if we invest ourselves, then we get to see the truths revealed in the Vedas, in the Vedas through bhakti. Govinda Maripusham Tamaham Bhajami. So Prabhupada's making the point, we hear and we all get to determine how much do we trust different authorities. So I could say I'm very glad if I look at the trajectory of my life. So yes, so going back 40 some years, I had practically no trust in Vedic authorities or Srila Prabhupada or Lord Brahma or Bhagavad Gita. And basically my authorities were like, the scientific establishment, things like that. Okay, so now I'm glad to say I'm highly skeptical, even cynical of what I'll tend to hear. Doesn't mean I automatically reject. Blind acceptance is no virtue. Blind rejection is no virtue. And I'm increasingly skeptical of what's coming in the name of science, as not just like we hear cliche from Prabhupada's teachings, but I can say it's really subjected to cheating, illusion, mistakes, limitations. We can read in a journal in practically any field. 30 years ago, we used to believe, but now we know. Okay, so, or even, let's say, the science of nutritionists or something. nutritionists, say Western allopathic type nutritional science in the 1950s, it would be difficult to find an article, what to speak of a book in the 1950s, saying that like that would tend to indicate not just that yes, you can be healthy on a vegetarian diet, but just that even a complete vegetarian with no meat, that is dangerous, that's bad for your health. You read that pretty much completely in Western science. Okay, now of course, and now increasing, that's changing more and more. So, oh, actually, a vegetarian diet, making sure you get enough protein and B12, this and that, it can be very healthy. So I'm just saying it's like changing. I think both of you may have read Srila Prabhupada's Shastra. So I talked there about a landmark event for me that was transformational for me in moving towards trusting what Prabhupada's given, because I had a lot of doubts. When reading about Prabhupada's descriptions from the Bhagavatam of cosmology, moon, sun, different planetary systems. And then I was kidnapped in 1984, and I was sent to Iowa, at the rehab center in Iowa. There was just like a table, and there was a popular science magazine. I picked it up, and the science magazine talked about cosmology and cosmography, and it described that modern astronomy and cosmography describes there are 14 dimensions of reality. We only have access to like 4, length, width, height, and time. And the other 4, mathematically, it's clear they exist. The other 10, mathematically, it's clear they exist. And to understand about creation and Big Bang, we need to accept that there are dimensions, 14 dimensions altogether. Most of them are beyond the purview of our material senses. So I was like, and this was specifically 14. So for me, that was special. Because I say, well, that's exactly what Srila Prabhupada's writing, what the Bhagavatam's going to do. 14 planetary systems, each with its own distinctive time relativity. Prabhupada would often compliment Albert Einstein and his theory of relativity. So I thought, like, wow. And back when the Bhagavatam was compiled and revealed, according to Western historical, anthropological, archaeological paradigms, these were just cavemen grunting. Well, then how did they reveal about 14 planetary systems, each which is time relativity like that? So that's one amongst many things that really enhanced my trust in the Vedic scientific paradigm. Okay. So Prabhupada in the introduction, quoting here now from the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and then as the introduction goes on, he quotes extensively from the 8th chapter, just as he's been quoting extensively from the 15th chapter. And let me see, I think I'll pause there. Ladini Shakti or Bhaktidevan, any comments or questions at this time? If not, I'll read. Hare Krishna, Ladini. Yeah.
Well, thank you for the reading. It's very refreshing to hear Bhagavad Gita introduction.
Okay.
I am dressing the deities. So Shri Radha, Madan Mohan are listening to your class as they are being dressed. I'm really curious about your new picture.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Okay. Thanks for inquiring.
Are these from Akshaya Patra deities?
Okay. Yeah. First, so it's Ekadashi, so you're dressing your deities, yes?
Well, not because it's Ekadashi, but anyhow, I'm dressing them.
Yeah, thanks for your question. So Okay, so, okay, I'll start my answer by saying the switch from the current Radha Krishna deity picture to the Radha Krishna painting that was there for more than 12 years. It really had nothing to do with me. Uh,
So I assumed.
you assume that kind of, yeah, kind of like, so there was, someone else was here and said, what about this, that, and make this switch? And I was like, okay, like that. Okay. So, it was, Nitya Gopal Prabhu was here, also Hari Gopal. And they had more ideas about what to do with the temple room in my home. They had more ideas. And so Nitya Gopal was so my understanding, I think I'm forgetting the deities' names, but these are the deities in ISKCON Bangalore Vrindavan, in Vrindavan, the Bangalore branch of Vrindavan. So it's connected with Akshaya Patra. And is it Radha Govinda? I feel embarrassed that I'm forgetting their
I
names.
think it's Radha Vrindavan Chandra.
Correct. Sri Radha Vrindavan. Somehow you know it and I didn't. Oh my God. Okay, Hare Krishna. Yeah, Sri Radha Vrindavan Chandra. They're in Vrindavan, and Nitya Gopal and Hare Gopal. They had it, and so the Radha Krishna painting that was up here for more than 12 years is now in the corner guest room where you've stayed in past years. And so that's what happened. And they've talked to me about other changes they strongly recommend. And I think I'll kind of be like, I'll kind of like agree as long as it doesn't require too much of my time like that.
They're really gorgeous. Your deities there. Hare
Yeah.
Krishna. Thank
So
you for
I'd like this. It's interesting you asked that one because just today during japa, for the first time, because first time I was really endeavoring to be present with this deity picture. I mean, it's been there for a week or so or something like that, but I was very moved. I was feeling like this bright effulgence, like this bright personal effulgence touched my heart. I was sitting on the chair, and it's like the first time I felt some personal relationship and connection. So interesting you asked that today.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, I came to tell you their names.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Ladini. Anything else?
Guys, can you hear?
Hare Krishna Bhakti,
Are you hearing me?
I'm hearing you now. Yes.
Yeah, we don't have power, so we don't have Wi-Fi. So I think not a very good connection.
Is your electricity is out?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So not a great connection. But I was hearing you clearly. I'm hearing you clearly.
Good, good.
I still have this term running through my head, psychoforensic evidence, and you responded to a letter I wrote you kind of asking about that term because it's just things I'm unfamiliar with seem to stand out. And today you used some terms around science that were new for me actually, and then like something about the dimensions and atoms, and I think it was the type of machine that can view the atoms. You mentioned, you know. So, you know, I do appreciate you sharing personal stories about realizations where you were experiencing doubts. It's reinforcing to me. I experienced doubts, and in doing some personal reflection, I saw different, I would even say demonic, kind of demonic parts of myself, darker parts, and that's, I guess in men's groups, sometimes we call those shadow parts, and I idea is if we see those parts, we can hold them in the light. Basically, then they're not in our subconscious acting against us. We can be more at choice.
Yeah.
So in that way, I'm appreciating the realizations I'm getting through my doubts. And yeah, so that's just all what's alive for me. I think I tried to come on at different points or earlier to lead Jairada Madhava, but the connection was just not good enough. So
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Thanks for being here. And somehow, Hare Krishna, somehow I haven't lost electricity here. I know many other neighborhoods and sections of Alatra have lost electricity. Of course, it could happen anytime because even though the storm's mostly over, trees can still fall on lines and things. But thanks for sharing, Bhakti Devin. Yeah, I appreciate your presence here. Yeah, that was a big process for me. I mean, still is, but like not even 1% of what it was because, I had my period. I took 1,000 plates of prasad, read some Prabhupada's books over a few years. And then in 1984, I decided to like really commit myself, at least for 6 months. I moved into the temple ashram in Ranana outside of Tel Aviv. And uh, uh, Nitya Prabhu was temple president, and meaning his wife was my first like temple mother there. And practically immediately when I moved in, I felt bliss and ecstasy, like a real freedom like that. But after about a week, I started like I was plagued by doubts because like my mind and false ego were attacking me, like to get out of this. Like, what are you doing? You're gonna ruin all your plans. And so I would read Prabhupada's books and I'd find this, and it was like really tormenting. It was very painful for me. It was very painful for me. Then a few weeks later, I went to visit family in Philadelphia, got kidnapped, this and that. And my kidnapping route, I could see Krishna and Prabhupada were really helping me through that science magazine. And I was still struggling. I was still struggling, I would say, somewhat significantly for like another 4 or 5 years, but in a diminishing way, like it was less and less, but still, and I would find things. And then I found that through continuing to read Prabhupada's books, chanting, sometimes I would go to the temple room, whether it was in the years when I became temple president in Tel Aviv early in '97. I would go to the temple room just on my own. I would like get Dandavat obeisances to Srila Prabhupada, and I would just kind of try to pray sincerely that my doubts get relieved, that my doubts are destroyed, by transcendental knowledge. And then, and so it was a painful time for me. And all in all, I'm deeply grateful because I like Prabhupada would reveal to me resolutions of apparent contradictions in ways that I couldn't conceive with mundane intelligence. But as I served with deeper and deeper sincerity, not that I deep sincerity, but relative to what I was doing, then I would get realizations and revelations, and I would make connections and understand themes and principles that connected all the dots. And so through the process, my intelligence became like deeply convinced and deeply fixed in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And a lot of that came through working through the doubts, through study, through questions, and through like really sometimes some gut-wrenching, soul-searching, and going deeper and deeper in my bhakti. And so as a result, my intelligence, became deeply convinced, and I value that and appreciate that so much. Thanks for sharing. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama
Hare Krishna.
Ladini Shakti.
I just want to add that it's really moving to hear this, like how personally Krishna cares for his devotees.
Yeah.
you know, like even in the retrospect, Govinda Prabhu, that you are looking at these doubts and seeing like, well, it was like wonderful to have them.
Yeah.
And then like maybe thanks to them, like, you know, getting more faith in the process, like as the doubts were like cleared one after another through like, you know, whatever different scientific reports or whatever you encountered,
Yeah.
like one with the 14 dimensions. It's really, yeah, it's touching to see how Krishna is just like arranges this way. And then in retrospect, you know, I'm not saying necessarily in the moment, but in retrospect, it's like, wow, it was like so expertly arranged, everything, you know, like the kidnapping and the doubts and all that.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting how, yeah, we're talking about my processes reveals such personal care and connection. And I got that, yeah, that Krishna and Srila Prabhupada were personally facilitating me in ways that I'm so grateful for, and without the difficulties, I would not have got whatever purification or realization I got. Yeah, because the Iowa and the Science magazine, that was really just before I escaped. And for a week before that, yeah, I was with the kidnappers. And as I've shared in different forums, and the kidnapping itself, I know for sure that was super soul reciprocating with my doubts, and the kidnappers essentially, there was like that whole deprogramming. It was like it was the best the planet had to offer, to persuade someone to not practice this Krishna consciousness thing.
They were like your doubts personified.
Exactly, they were my doubts personified. And then in the personified, they were so lame. They were, yeah, they were so lame. They were so lacking any semblance of intelligence. It was
They
such,
basically did reflective listening to your doubts.
yes, yeah. And it was just like, and so as you probably both heard me share, to some extent, the most challenging part of that week was keeping a straight face while convincing them, like, oh, that's a really good point. Yeah, you've defeated the entire Bhagavatam. Wow, it's amazing, while not letting them think I'm surrendering too quick like that. And yes, yeah, of course, yeah, it was also, they were, they would say blasphemous things about Srila Prabhupada. So there were challenging elements that were very painful. So I don't want to make it was all like a joke. It was like that. But from a philosophical point of view, yeah, I needed to try to keep a straight face and like that. And then like I just had deeper trust and faith in Prabhupada and Krishna after that week, just because of that, apart from the Science magazine.
I'm
So
sure your parents were very happy.
yes, yes. Well, my parents were not very happy. But if we fast forward 25 years, and I know you both know those parts of the stories. If we passed 25, 20 years when they both left their body, they actually were very happy. But as a quarter century went on, and Krishna also facilitated them in expert ways.
Yeah, it's so personal. Did, like in the introduction reading, you were sharing about the please remove the effulgence.
Yeah,
Prabhupada writes that in the introduction, or that was your, like, I'm not sure if it was you expanding on Shri Prabhupada's writing, or if Shri Prabhupada was writing that.
that was kind of my purport.
Okay, that's it.
That was like my purport. Yeah, but Prabhupada doesn't directly reference that there. And yeah, Prabhupada's in that part of what we read, Prabhupada is emphasizing service to the Supreme Person. And so I was just, I was giving a bit of a class, a bit of a purport that even the Brahmin realized souls who are sincere and not envious, like the personified Vedas, they want to see and serve the Supreme Person. And that's it, yeah, because yeah, ultimately there's, you know, it is said that variety is the spice of life. And so in that Brahma Gyoti, there's the bliss of the freedom from material miseries and material desires, but there's no variety, so it kind of gets boring. And so the personified Vedas, they know. So for service ultimately means serving a person. It means serving a person. And so I was kind of commenting on that aspect and referencing Hiran Mayena Patrina Satyasya Pitam Mukam. Mukam means face. I want to see your smiling face. Tattvam. 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 Awesome quote. Satya Dharma Adrishte. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. And I have one little sharing, if I may.
Yes.
So I don't know if Bhaktadeva knows, but I know you know Dhira Govinda Prabhu, that I started to do some service in ISKCON.
Yeah.
We go in the morning in the temple. Well, and I am also seeing like, okay, so I was like banned from ISKCON, you know, during the first years that I was practicing Krishna consciousness. And then it took 8 years before I put my foot there again. And it was, you know, quite painful time with no devotee association during that time. But I see Krishna's arrangement so much in that now too, because like I am more, not that I'm mature, but I'm more mature than I was 8 years ago. And it's so interesting because I think like if the devotees meet and they are not that mature yet, there is like so much like conflict and, you know, this and that. And then they don't necessarily see each other as devotees, you know, but see like there are different resentments and you did this to me and you said that, and, you know, all these kind of things. But I kind of like appeared there, you know, after all that things.
Yes.
And there is just so much. It's really funny. Like you know, I don't really know what I am doing, but they are like so appreciative of me. I think really it's because I'm on time and I do what I said.
Amazing. Amazing.
You know, I cannot
Yeah, I've
like
heard there's some
my
kind of
mind.
magic around you.
Yes.
And you know, I'm not sure what is it, but my assumption is like these two things. And also like someone tells me like, I don't know, you know, we don't put this towel here, we put it there. I'm like, oh, okay, I will do it. Oh wow, that's amazing. You know, that there is like someone who cooperates. Anyhow, so it's fun. It's fun. And I see Krishna's arrangement in that because I have a sense that I will have some service to do there, and it would be spoiled if I went prematurely.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I mean, our stories are quite different, but the themes are the same. So just like it was very painful, difficult experience for me. So it's very difficult for you. You're able to laugh at it now, but back in 2015, 9 years ago, it was very painful for you. You were rejected and like that. It's a painful experience. And you're seeing how Krishna, in reciprocating with you and the devotees in the Czechia Yatra, is actually perfect and complete, and so sweet and auspicious the way it's unfolding. Very, very, as Devin commented, very magical, auspicious story.
Yeah, and last point is that I got offered, and I don't know if you remember that, but one of the rejection part was that I was wanting to do service in Govinda restaurant, and then I couldn't. And after like first morning in the temple, they said like, oh, we are like so, you know, whatever, qualified, and this and that. Do you want to go to Govinda? So Krishna is like giving everything this year.
Yeah, right. Right. It's so, right. If Krishna wants to give with us, we could have a million hands and we can't receive. So when it rains, it pours. So you were shut out. You were shut out at, you were shut out at now there's this abundance of flowing offerings of service from that same community. Amazing.
Hare Krishna.
Thanks for sharing, Hare Krishna. Very amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, these are among some favorite pastimes of Ladini and Krishna for me. And I mean that cheeky. It's cheeky, but it's sincere. Reading posts on Facebook about Ladini being rejected from ISKCON, and then she's like so respected in that same community, you know, certain community. I think it's something that comes up for me that I'm inspired by often. Yeah, that I've heard they're acknowledging there's some magic about you. There's something, you know, I think I heard they ordered you to do some service on Padayatra of handling like interpersonal situations and something. Yeah. So I love reading these posts, and actually I didn't exactly frame them as Krishna's really divine and perfect arrangements. I get that, but I hadn't like used that language within my own head, and that really works for me. And I'm anxious now. I'm anxious to see, you know, more how that's happening in my life. And I can definitely see just in my relationship with Kanchambala and the children, and she's brought me more into Krishna consciousness, and in Grihastha ashram, the healthy pressure of leading my family spiritually is definitely good for me. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Thank you for sharing Bhakti.
Okay.
And I hear some of your children associates there, and Krishna Jivani, as she was recently in the foundational seminar, as I know you're aware, and that was very, very wonderful as far as I'm concerned. Thanks for sharing, Bhakti Devin, your appreciation for Ladini Shakti and what she's co-creating there in her services. And thanks for sharing your personal process. Yeah, and through your sharing, I'm also sharing, I was kind of there at the original seeds of your relationship with Kanchambala, and that I'm also very moved how that has unfolded in wonderful Krishna conscious ways. So thanks for expressing. Any other comments or sharing before we close?
Well, I will give one last appreciation to Bhaktadevan, that I could definitely, well, we didn't have that much association since you got married, but I can definitely see how you made like a quantum jump progress through that ashram. It's an ashram. So yes, it increases my faith to see the progress of the devotees around me, including yourself, Bhaktadevan. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you both. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Thanks for your association. Hare Krishna.